And in conclusion, we have Mr. Chambers, who has been our principal for 5 years. Mr. Chambers, what's it been like being principal for all these years?
Tim, I have found it very challenging. The experience has been a very challenging one, but it's also been very rewarding. Day in and day out, a variety of activity. No day is the same, but I think the principal reward is working with the students and the faculty. The caliber of the faculty and the caliber of the student body makes it a very enjoyable experience. You have your days when you wonder why you ever became principal, and you'd be much happier if you were just in a classroom situation, but those days are few and far between.
Last June 6th, you were affiliated to the First Order of the Friars Minor. What were your reactions when you learned that you were going to be affiliated?
I think my first reaction was complete joy and thrill at the thought of being able to be affiliated with the order. And the day of the affiliation certainly was probably the happiest day of my life.
What do you see in the future now for Timon High School?
Well, as you know, Tim, we've had quite a bit of innovation this year, and study on innovation and evaluation being carried on by the faculty, in which we've involved some of the student body and also some of the alumni. And the future, I think, looks very challenging and very interesting. We are planning over a 2 or 3 year period many innovations in education, new structures, new courses, which I think the students are going to profit from greatly. Our attempt is to make the whole program more individualized, to meet the needs of a greater number of the student body, and to treat them more on an individual basis. And this, of course, calls for a complete revamping of our present program and looking into some of the new techniques, innovations which are on the horizon in education, and we hope to be able to implement them in Timon High School starting in this coming September and more fully the following September of 1973.
Okay, thank you very much, Mr. Chambers.
My name is Mark Schroeder from the class of 1974, and I had a special relationship with Mr. Chambers during my time here at Timon, but it never stopped. I've always relied on him for his leadership. The one thing I wanted to share with you, when I was a senior here at Timon in 1974, Mr. Chambers right now is probably somewhere in his 80s. And so in 1974, when I was a senior, I got wind that it was his 40th birthday. And so we, the student body, decided to have a celebration without him knowing it. And we had a big rally in the auditorium. All the students were there. And we had on the backdrop a sign that said, "Happy Birthday, Rock." Now, you may be seeing it on the yearbook. It's in the 1974 yearbook. Now, Mr. Chambers' nickname was Rock, but you weren't supposed to know it, and certainly you weren't supposed to say it. But we got wind of it, so we put it on the backdrop of the stage. And if you look at the yearbook, he made the decision not to let it go as it was supposed to. It only says happy. But now you know the rest of the story. That was in 1974. We said happy birthday, Rock. Now, on behalf of the class of 74, Mr. Chambers, we'd like to thank you for everything that you've done for all of us. And especially as we get older, we realize how much you meant to us.
Hello, everyone. I'm Jim Zed, graduate of class of 1966, and I'm sure that Bob remembers me. He was my homeroom teacher in room 202, and I'm not going to bore you with a lot of those stories, but congratulations, Bob, on another award. I know you received many awards and much recognition. There's probably more awards that you should get as well for all the great teaching you did here at Timon as an administrator, and just being such a big part of the school for so many years. In our homeroom, room 202, and you were also my Latin teacher as a sophomore. And one of the more common Latin phrases was alia jacta est, the die is cast. Well, that is very true here at Timon, because the die is cast for a new regime here at Timon to build on the successes of all you administrators and teachers from the past, and we are very encouraged by where we're headed and where we are going. I know that in the 60s, it was a different world and it was a different time. But I have to do this, Bob. One of the sayings around the school was, "Don't mock the rock or the rock will sock." I just had to say it. But congratulations on your award. All your awards you received, you certainly deserved, and there's probably a lot more out there that you should receive as well. Thanks so much for your dedication to Timon. Thanks for being a mentor, and best wishes for the future. Thanks.
Good morning. My name is Ted Oberdorf, class of 1960. My first recollection of Bob was when he taught me at the Annex in 1956. Since that time, we have been close friends, and as we progress through life, my wife and I and my children and Bob Chambers have been interwoven. He's been part of our whole life. And I have multiple stories. My story I'm going to tell today is about my son Michael, who graduated in 1984. He was a very good student. He was the class president, he was the school president, and Bob had given him the President's Award or the Principal's Award that year. Summer's over. During the course of the summer, Michael and a bunch of his friends got a cottage up at Crystal Beach. As would happen, they were partying. And the police would come and they would say, "Calm down," and each time a different kid would go out to meet the police. And finally, the policeman was frustrated. It was my son Mike's turn, they called him Ozzy, to go out and meet the police. Please, son, I'm going to write you up, and you have to have an appearance. He go, "What's your name?" And my son, without batting an eye, blurted out, "Robert H. Chambers." He said, "What's your address?" 601 McKinley Parkway, Buffalo, New York. And so he wrote him up the ticket, gave it to him, and he was supposed to appear in Fort Erie Court in 2 weeks. Well, of course, he goes away to college, forgets the whole thing, never shows up. And a certain Robert H. Chambers was convicted in absentia because he never appeared. It was in the Fort Erie paper. And time goes by, and everybody in South Buffalo knew what happened except my wife and I and Bob Chambers. A summons comes to Bishop Timon High School for Robert H. Chambers. And all of a sudden, the truth comes out. As it turns out, Bob Chambers and I had to go to the Fort Erie courtroom and sit there in the bullpen with everybody else, all the other defendants. There were thieves and prostitutes, and we're sitting there holding our yearbook. And as it turned out, we went before the judge, and I said, "This is the real Robert H. Chambers," and we showed the policeman who issued the summons a picture of my son. He said, "Yeah, that's the guy who showed up." So Bob is free and clear to go back into Canada. 25 years later, my son Mike still is not. So that's my story of Bob Chambers. I have multiple stories of Bob. Wonderful person, wonderful influence in our life. I love you, Bob. We all love you. Have a great evening.
Thumbs up. Good evening, everybody. My name is Tom Sullivan. I am a 1975 graduate of Bishop Timon St. Jude High School. I had the pleasure of having Bob Chambers as my principal during that time. And I also had the great pleasure of eventually succeeding Bob as principal at Bishop Timon. The thing I remember most about Bob Chambers is the fact that he was a great mentor to so many of us students, and then to me personally when I became principal. The thing I remember most about him especially is the way he lived the gospel. He always told us about the importance of being men of integrity, being men who lived the mission of Bishop Timon St. Jude High School. And of all the attributes that I can think, when I think of the name of Bob Chambers, I think of a man who really lived his life in the spirit of Francis and the spirit of Jesus, and giving of himself continuously to all of us. So to Bob Chambers, I want to say thank you for being a great role model to so many of us at Bishop Timon St. Jude High School, and I wish you the very best.